All right, am I on? Okay. I think we're on. Let's do it. Let's do it in the name of rock and roll. So, welcome, folks, to this. Let me do a little bit of product placement for you here. Welcome to this little tutorial here. This is going to be a live tutorial. Somebody had requested over and over and over. Somebody had requested a tutorial where I demonstrate how to have a drop down, and you select something and then it populates another drop down. And I tried the usual, you know, ignoring the message and all of that, but he kept going on and on and on. So I figured, okay, let's do that tutorial. And that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to do it live. That's right, going to do it live. How you doing, gear? Ahoy to you. Now let me show you what's coming up in this tutorial. I did have a wee attempt earlier on and I completely messed it up. I make no secret of it. I don't have any notes or anything. But this is a client of mine from the past. And it's an example of the type of thing we're going to be doing. So this is a car leasing website. And you can see that we've got these makes here. So we select a make such as BMW, and then you see that this is giving us, these are all BMWs, you know. So that's what we're talking about. And if we select something like Audi, then these are all Audis, okay? You get the idea. Now, I'm not going to do a design or anything like that, and I'm not going to do other drop downs. But hopefully this will at least give you some little idea of how these types of things work. So that's what we're going to do. And here's a list of everything that's coming up in this video. There's going to be quite a lot here. I think that it's going to take me about 45 minutes to an hour to get through all of this. And I am going to be going quite fast. You'll see times where I do things like this and you'll go, what the heck's going on? These are just keyboard shortcuts that I'm using. And maybe I'll teach you that in another video. I'm going to be doing, just to let you know, this stuff is all PHP. We'll get through this really, really quickly. And then at this point, I'd say around about here, this is going to be mostly JavaScript. We'll use vanilla JavaScript, and that takes a wee bit longer, you know. So that's what's coming up. And hopefully this time I won't have any catastrophic errors. Shall we dance? Okay. So I'm going to start off with, actually, by starting up XAMPP. I have XAMPP on my computer here, and MySQL is running, and Apache. And also, I would recommend, if you don't already have it, I do recommend getting the Trongate desktop app. It's free, don't you know? It will always be free. And you can get it from trongate.io/download. I'm quite nervous here. I don't have any notes. Just a couple of botched up attempts. Anyway, you can get it from there for Mac, Windows and Linux. When you download it, it's made with Electron. You'll just have a little icon and you just double click on it and it will open, okay? Unless you're with Linux, in which case you'll have to do all handstands with the command line. But that's okay. You're a Linux character. It's cool. Anyway, when you open up this little thing, you're going to have the Trongate desktop app. Now, we are going to go through this list here and watch how quickly we get through these first items. Shall we dance? All right. Oh, can you believe it? 2 million people watching already. Okay then, here we go. I'm going to create a new app. I'm going to call it Trongate Cars. By the way, I'll put the code on this, or the code for this, on GitHub later on. I'll leave a link in the description, okay? But I'm going to choose a location for this app. For me, it's inside htdocs, and I'm just going to generate. So that has now downloaded the latest version of Trongate from GitHub, and it's done all of the configuration, and there we go. All right. Now we're going to generate a makes module. So I'll say create new module. I'll call it make. That's the singular. So it's going to suggest a label of manage makes. We will not have an icon. We'll have a variable character of make. We'll add that property, and we're going to order by make ascending. I apologize if this all does seem a wee bit fast, you know, but I just want to get the boilerplate stuff out of the way, you know. So just a simple makes module, and that's now done. Now we're going to add some sample makes data. So I'll click view module. Here's our fabulous little module. I'm going to add Audi, and we'll have another record, BMW, and another one, Citroen, okay, and there we go. Now I've built, I reckon, about 12 websites, not all like this, but for the motor trade. And whenever you see this type of thing, in case you're wondering, this data comes from a company called Cap, and they charge about $1,000 a month for this stuff, you know. So on a real site, they won't have somebody inserting this. They just pay a fee and they read it from an API. Thought you might like to know. Anyway, that's some sample makes data, and that is done. Now we're going to generate a models module. So create new module, new Trongate module. I'm going to say model, that's the singular. Manage models. I won't bother with an icon. I'm just going to have one property, a variable character, which is the model. You know, like Ford Escort would be the model, something like that. Now there's not going to be a URL column. We'll order by model ascending and generate. Okay, so that's another one off the list. Now we're going to build a module relation. So at the desktop app, I'm going to click OK. Create module relation. We're going to have a one-to-many relationship. The parent module is going to be makes. The child module is going to be models. The parent identifier column is going to be make. And the child is going to be model. Let's generate that module relationship. Okay, so that's us done that. It's another one off the list. Now we're going to add some sample model data. So we'll click view the models module, create new model record, and we're just going to add a bunch of these. So let's have an A1, which is an Audi. Let's have an A4, which is another Audi. Then we'll have a 3 Series, which is a BMW. Then we'll have a 5 Series, which is also a BMW. And let's just have a 7 Series as well. Okay, and we'll just add a couple of Citroens here. So create new record. We'll have a Berlingo, that is a Citroen. And then finally, we'll have a C4. Now, do you remember I was selecting the identifier column? This is what it's referring to. If I zoom you in, it's giving us the thing that helps us to identify the record. So we said the make column, and that's what this is, okay? So now you know. So there you go. We've now added in a whole bunch of models. We've got some nice navigation on the top left, and everything is fantasticola. So there we go. Now let's add a nice little template onto the home page. If we go to the home page, you'll see the usual kind of default Trongate page here. So let me open this project up in my text editor. So here we go, it's Trongate Cars, and I'm going to go to modules, welcome. Now this is the default module that we've got, and I'm going to just say data view module equals welcome, data view file equals welcome. Then we're going to load up a template. This will be the public template, and we're passing in the data. So let's now go to this views file here. We'll get rid of this thing, and we'll have a little section here with an H1 that says welcome to, and I'm going to just use PHP short tags and echo website name. Now that's a terrible headline, by the way, but I'm doing it just to give you an idea of how this is going to look, and that's how it's going to look. And by the way, this website name is coming in from our config folder, specifically the file site owner. Here it's right here, and whenever we mention website name, it will add that in. All of this was set up automatically. Now let's do a little H2 and we'll say get a quote. There you go. Kind of cool. And by the way, if we inspect and then have a look at this little mobile icon, check it out. We got slide navs and everything, all out of the box. Okay, so with that being the case, what we're going to do now is go back to the welcome controller, and we're going to fetch makes from the database. Now that's going to be a bunch of rows that we get by calling the model. The model's a class that comes with Trongate, and we can use it to fetch things from the database. So with the model, I'm going to invoke a thing called get, and I'm going to order by make, and the table that I'm going to get from is the one that is called makes. Now by the way, if I say JSON rows true, you can see there's the stuff from the database all nicely presented, and JSON is a little thing that I've added to the Trongate framework. It makes life easier. Now what I want to do is take those rows and then add them into the view file and then present them in a drop-down menu. By the way, I almost forgot. If we go to our list, we've added a nice template. Okay, done. All right. Right, okay. So now that we've done our template, and now that I'm completely lost, I'll just finish what I was saying. I'm going to be passing in some makes and then populating a drop-down menu. This is nice, but it's not quite the format that we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say make options. I'm going to set up this array. First little, what's the word? Key value pair is going to have an empty string for the key, and it's going to say select make ... like that. Then I'm going to say for each rows as row, I'm going to say make options, and the key is going to be row loading up ID. That is going to be equal to row make. And now if I say JSON make options true, you'll see, hold on a minute. Haha. Why on earth is that doing that? Make options. There's our row. Let me do a little JSON row. Hold on. So we've got our different IDs. We are saying that make options of this row, we are saying JSON make options. Oh, you know what? It's a typo. I did an extra S. That's what it is. Alright, so there we go. So now we've got this. Now this may look similar to what we had before, but in actual fact, what we had before, and I'll just bring it back, we had JSON rows, and I'll just show you what that looked like as a little reminder. So that's what we had, okay? And all we've done is we've built a little loop here. We've established an array, and it's basically just simplifying this loop, and it's giving us this. Now this is something that we can pass into a drop-down menu. So for the moment, I'm just going to say data make options equals, and we'll say that that equals whatever the make options are, and refresh. Okay, now My to-do list has gone up in smoke here. I had built a custom API endpoint, but let's just continue as we are, and we'll make a start on the dropdown, and we'll do the API endpoint in just a minute, right? So on this welcome page, we're going to build a little form. I'm going to echo form open. It's going to go somewhere, and it's going to have an array where ID is assigned to quote underscore form. We're going to echo form close and a closing PHP tag. Now let's echo form label, and we're going to say make. Then I'm going to echo form dropdown. And the way that this works is we chuck in a name for the form field. So let's say, for example, make ID. Then we chuck in our options. I'll say make options. And then we chuck in our selected option. So if we do that, save and refresh. Pardon me, it's called make options. There you go. All right. And you can see that drop down there. It's absolutely fantastic. Okay. Now, at this point, I am going to take a little trip back to the list here, and we're going to build a custom API endpoint for this app of ours. Believe it or not, we've already built a whole bunch of endpoints. Let me show you. If you go to the base URL, API Explorer Models, you'll see that we have a whole bunch of endpoints, and they're all locked and loaded. We've got token-based authorization and everything. Look, there's all of the makes, see? Or rather, all of the models in this case. If you wanted the makes, you'd go to API Explorer /makes, see? And there's the makes. Kind of cool. So you get a whole bunch of stuff without even having to do any work. You can also see, by the way, that when we created our module relation, it's added a column called makes underscore ID. So it has taken the name of the module that it's related to, and it's just added an underscore ID, and that's how those tables are being joined there. All right, so you got a whole bunch of endpoints. Congratulations to you, and maybe you'll enjoy using that. But what we're going to do for this little tutorial is we're going to build our own custom API endpoint. To do this, I'm going to ask you to open up models, controllers, and it's our models controller file. Remember, we're talking about the car models, you know, Ford Escorts and all of that stuff. I'm going to make a little method in here called fetch by make, like that. And what this is going to do is it's going to read a make ID from the URL. I'm going to say make ID is an integer of segment 3, and I'll do a little var dump on this make ID here. So if we head over to the base URL, models / fetch by make / let's say 2, you can see that the page is saying integer 2. Now the reason why I added this int in here is because if we just said segment 3 like this, you'll see that it reads the 2 from the URL, but when it initializes it as a variable, it turns it into a string. And that is potentially a security risk. And I have the philosophy lately that if you're reading a number from the URL, say an integer, why not just turn it into an integer with int like that? It's as simple as that. And by doing that, we are making SQL injection literally impossible. So this is really good for security, okay? So now we're going to make a little SQL statement up here. I'm going to say SQL equals select all, let's say from, I'll do this in capitals just for clarity. So select all from models where it's going to be makes ID equals, and then we'll chuck in the make ID. and then we'll order by model. There is our query. Check it out. We can even look at it and everything. Okay, so that's our query. Now, this query is going to return a bunch of rows. So I'll say rows. We're going to call upon the model, and inside the model class, there is a little method by the name of query. Query accepts two arguments, an SQL query and how you want your results to be returned. In this case, it's always going to be an array, but each record, I want them to be objects. So I'm going to say object here. You could say array if you prefer, it doesn't really matter. But when we're happy, I'll just say JSON rows, save, and there you go. So there's our endpoint. If we say ID of 1, now that's Audi. There you go there. ID of 3. And if you do a rubbish ID like 88, it just gives you an empty array. Okay? So that's that. But I should actually say, and I'll do a little comment here, be extra careful when you use this query thing here. I was almost tempted to not show you this, because if you accept variables from the URL and then just generate SQL queries, there is a chance of SQL injection. Normally, if I was doing a custom query, I would do query binding, which is all covered in the documentation. But I'm going to use query on this occasion because we have made it safe by turning it into an integer. But just be extra careful when you use this type of stuff. Alright, so there's our endpoint. Now, in order for this to look so nice, if I show you the source code, you'll see that we've got some HTML tags here. That's not much use if we're building an API endpoint. So let's take this out, and we're going to just echo JSON encode rows. Alright, this is a PHP function, and it's going to give us the same data, but all squashed up and ready to rock and roll. Okay, so we just built a custom endpoint. Here it is. Oh, hallelujah. Give me a wee second here. How are we doing? Am I still unpopular? Oh, ahoy, Christian. Ahoy, Arco, new name, and nicely spotted with the typo. And ahoy to the great Stefan. We were all on earlier and I mucked it up, but we're not going to muck this one up, folks. Okay, so we've just made a custom endpoint. Now, as you can see, we do indeed have a fabulous, do you hear me? A fabulous API Explorer that looks like this. And you know, we can actually add our custom endpoint onto this page quite easily. Let me show you how. We're just going to go into the models module. We're going to go to assets and API.json. And in there, you'll find a whole bunch of settings in JSON format. And each and every one of those settings is what's coming up here. This is all of our endpoints here, right? It's funny that I clicked on find one. That was kind of an accident. But in the case of find one, for example, you'd put in a number. Let's say you'd hit something like bypass authorization. Now, that one, we are very careful about security, right? But that endpoint has not been activated. So if I just go to find one here, which is the one that we're testing, if I say something like a little comma, I'll zoom you in, and I'll say authorization, and then I'll put in a little asterisk. That means it's now wide open. So if we submit, there's our record and all is well. That's pretty much how it works. And we have an incredible, super easy to use authorization system. You can authorize people by roles. So for example, you could say, okay, I'm going to have admin and members allowed. You can do stuff like that. You can authorize by ID. There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's really easy and it's all covered in the documentation. Now, I was saying a minute ago, why would you even want to have our endpoint featuring on here? Well, here's why. If we go to our little custom thing here, and then we add one line of code, it's going to just be API underscore auth with parenthesis. With just this little line of code, it means that we can have all of that token security stuff working automatically. Oh, hallelujah. So let me show you what I mean. If we take the find, where on earth is it? Find one, right? This is quite close to what I'm after. So let's copy find one, head upstairs, and we'll paste in. So we'll make one up and we'll call it fetch by make. Now the URL segments, this is where our endpoint is going to live. So I'm going to say models / fetch by make. And you see this here? This is a little placeholder where we're going to have a variable that changes. I'll zoom you in a bit. So that little variable is going to represent the make ID. So we can say something like make ID here. I mean, you don't need to, but if it makes life clearer, that's fine. So the name of our form field is make ID and the label is make ID. We can also say in the description, fetch some models that match, let me take the word some out. Fetch models that match a given make ID. There's our little description. There's our authorization. And if we save, refresh, look at the top, oh hallelujah, it's a custom API endpoint. And in fact, if we chuck in a make ID, let's do BMW, which has an ID of 2. I'm going to hit submit, and there you go. Remember I was saying that this gives you access to the authorization stuff. Look, if we take this out, it says not activated. And even if we head over to the URL, let's say some sneaky character's going to have a go. So models fetch by make / 2. It just doesn't work. So by adding this little setting in here, it gives us access to all of that super cool stuff. And if only Firebase was this easy. Are you paying attention, Google? I wish it was this easy. One line of code is all it takes. All right, so we have a little endpoint here. Let's just activate it again. There you go. And if we submit, there we are, okay? So back to the old to-do list. And that is our custom endpoint now done. All right, here comes the tricky part. This is building the drop-down system. And this is the moment where we slam on the brakes because we're about to do some JavaScript. Just give me a second. All right, so ready for a little bit of JavaScript? Let's do it. I'm going to go back to this welcome thing here. This is, of course, the view file for our home page. Here it is right here. Now we're already selecting the make, fair enough, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to add some attributes onto that make dropdown. So I'll just say make attribute. So make attributes. We're going to have an ID. I'm going to call it make underscore dropdown. Then I'm going to say make attributes on change, which means when the dropdown changes, I want something to happen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke select make like that. So we now pass those attributes in as a fourth argument, make attribute. There we go. And now, showtime at the Apollo. Let's do some JavaScript. Just good old vanilla JavaScript will be fine. So we'll make a little function up called select make. And just to prove that this works, I'll say alert ahoy. Okay, so save that. And if we... oh yeah, so what happened there? There you go. So on change, equals select make. How could I make such a stupid mistake? Anyway, let's just select. You can see that it says ahoy, and every time we change this, it's going to say ahoy. That is perfect. So let's see if we can do something a bit more meaningful than this. I'm going to say const make ID, and it's going to be make dropdown dot value, and let's now alert the make ID. Okay, we're going to select, choose BMW, it says 2, Citroen, it's going to say 3, and interestingly, if we choose select make, well, it's an empty string. So what we're going to do then is we're going to say if make ID is an empty string, well, we're going to alert you did not select a make, and that'll be that. Now otherwise, what we're going to do, let's add a spinner, a kind of loading spinner onto the page. So the idea here is that when they select a make, if it's a valid make, we're going to put a little spinner on the page and then head off to our API endpoint. We're going to fetch all of the models and then we get rid of the spinner. It sounds incredibly complicated, but it's actually incredibly easy. And here's how we do it. I'm going to say const spinner. Now brace yourself, because I am going to be adding in a lot of shortcuts here if I can remember how to do them. So the spinner is document create element div. Okay, again, I'll put all of the code on GitHub if you have challenges keeping up with this, but I'm using JavaScript to dynamically create a little div. That's all I'm doing, you know. And then I'm going to say for the spinner, let's set an attribute. We're going to give it an ID of spinner for reasons that you'll see in just a minute. And I'm also going to say spinner, let's set attribute with a class of spinner. Then I'm going to say for our quote form, we're going to append child and we're going to add on the little spinner. Now when you add a class of spinner onto a div with Trongate, if it's the latest version, watch what happens. We select, and hark the herald angels sing, it's a little spinner. Now if you want to adjust it, you can, of course. I'll just say style.spinner, maybe give it a margin of 2em. So now if I select, there's our little spinner, right? So that's happening because we're creating these divs that have got a class of spinner. By the way, you can see the mistake, right? Every time we do this, it's adding another spinner, and that's not too cool. So we're going to make a little function to deal with that. It's going to be called remove element. Now this little function is going to accept an element ID, and we're going to say const, and I'll say target element is document.get element by ID, and we'll try and get an element with that ID. Now I'm going to do a double if condition. I'm going to say if the target element does not equal null and the target element does not equal undefined. I hope that's right. If it's not, let me know in the comments and I'll write that was wrong, but I think that's right. And I'm going to just say target element dot remove. There you go. So whenever I want to remove an element from the page, all I have to do is call in remove element, or call remove element, pass in the element ID, and that's going to remove it. That is why we added an ID onto the spinner here, because the spinner would have worked without an ID. I'll comment it out. Look, without an ID, the spinner still works, right? So it's the class that draws the little spinner. The ID is simply being added so that when we call select make, we can say remove element of spinner. There we go. Save and refresh, And now you'll see that we don't have that problem anymore. Okay, well, I certainly hope that that makes sense. Now, the next thing that we're going to do, having now added a spinner onto the page, we're going to fetch models from the API, the one that we made, you know. So let's just call fetch models, and we'll pass in our make ID. So we're going to have a little function here. I'm going to call it fetch models. This takes in a make ID, and this is going to do a request to our API endpoint here. It's going to do a request to this endpoint location right here. Now, I have a little shortcut for doing a GET request, and this is going to really annoy you, but if I do that, I've got the JavaScript for a GET request. You can do alternative code. I use this because it's got really high browser compatibility, but if you're into alternative code like Fetch API or something, then be my guest. Again, the code is going to be on GitHub. But let me walk you through this. We're going to take a target URL. Now let me copy these URL segments here. I'm going to paste in. Now it's models fetched by make. We're going to add on that all important make ID. There you go. It's a GET request, new HTTP object, blah, 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 blah. We are expecting some JSON. Now you see this set request header token. We don't need it, not for this app. And then we send, okay? So that's doing a GET request. Now when the page loads up, we can actually do a little console.log, and we can have http.response text and save. And if we've done this right, I'll open up the inspector here, open up the console. Now keep an eye on the console here, and I'm going to select one of these. Well, I certainly messed that up. Okay, so it was the / here. Take that off and refresh. Here we go again. Okay, so there's our makes coming in. Do you see them on the bottom part of the screen here? It's in JSON format and it's fantasticola. Excellent. So now that we've fetched the stuff from the API, what we're going to do is we're going to say const models, and we're going to turn the text, because this is actually just text, we're going to turn it into an array. The way that we do that is we say json.parse, and it's json.parse http response text. Excellent. So we've now got an array of models, at least hopefully, right? With that, we're then going to say build model selector, something like that, and we'll pass in our models. You can call these little functions anything that makes you feel good, by the way. I'm just making this up as I go along, and I do not have notes. I only have a failed attempt. Anyway, we're going to build a little model selector thing. So the way that this is going to work is we'll start by removing the spinner. Seems like a reasonable start to me. Then I'm going to create a label. So I'll say const model label is, and it's going to be document create element label. I'm going to take that model label and I'm going to add a little attribute onto it. And that's not how we do it. It's that set attribute. So I'm going to say ID is model underscore label. Okay, that's kind of cool. Then I'll say model label inner HTML equals model, a little colon, and then we're just going to say quote form append child of model label. There you go. So as we select a make, you see how the label has just appeared? Alright, now by the way, do you see that? Loads of labels over and over and over again. And obviously that's not too cool. So we're going to add another little element, remove element, and of course it's model underscore label. Let's add that upstairs as well, won't do any harm. There we go. So everything looking good, all is well, and let's do the drop down. So we're going to create a little drop down so that people can select a model. So we're going to say const model drop down equals, and it's going to be document create element, and the element is a select element. Now we're going to say model drop down. We'll set an attribute here. We'll give it an ID of model underscore drop down. So that's us now got an ID. Then I'm going to say model drop down, set attribute on change. So again, when this thing changes, something is going to happen. What's going to happen? I'm going to call select model, and then I'll chuck in these brackets here. We call these brackets in the UK. I know that you call them parentheses in America. But there we go. Okay, so that's going to call select model. Now, if this was a real website, we might also say model dropdown set attribute name is model ID or something like that. Okay, doesn't really matter too much. The key vibe is we have created a little select element here, and now we're going to add it onto the page by saying quote form append child of model dropdown and save. So now if we select and see the drop down, looks kind of good. By the way, you can see the problem again. It keeps on building, right? So you know what we're going to do. That's right, you crazy rock and roller. We are going to remove element, and it's going to be our model drop down that we're going to remove. Let's move that up to the top as well. Something like that. So remove element, and there we go. Okay, so looking okay and looking okay. So now, do you remember how we passed in an array of models? We're going to loop through our array of models, and we're going to, for each model, we're going to create a little option that's going to go on the selector. So I'm going to do a for loop. We are looping through the models here, and I'm going to just say let option. You can actually even say const option, doesn't even matter. I think const is going to be my default, you know. But anyway, that is going to be document, oh gee, pardon me, create element, pardon me, and it's an option, okay? So we're creating a little option element there, and I'm going to say that option is going to have an attribute, so that would be set attribute, and I'll say that the value is models I, and we're going to pass in the ID. If I'm sounding a bit nervous, it's because we're in uncharted territory here, but I think we're okay. I'm also going to say option dot inner HTML is, I knew there was something wrong, it's models I. So models I, and it's going to be model. That's the inner HTML. Okay, so we've built up a little option thing. What now? Well, now we take our model drop down. We're going to append child of option. So if we save and refresh, now if we select, you'll see that we have the Audis. And if we do the BMWs, here are the BMWs. If you want to be super cool, by the way, you can go upstairs before the for loop and do something like this. And we'll give this one a value that's empty. and the inner HTML is going to just say select model ... So now we've got a pretty cool page happening here. Isn't that fantastic? Not too bad. Not too bad. Alright. So now we are going to have a little thing called select model, and this will be the last part of the jigsaw. So we'll have a little function here called select model, and what this is going to do is, well, let's just say if, now I suppose we should, I should probably, do we have an ID here? We do have an ID. Okay, so I'll say const model ID is going to be, and it's our model dropdown, dot value. Now let me just alert that. Okay, here we go. So we do that, and I'm going to choose, it says 4. Now let me do that again. Where is the, oh, do you know what? I forgot to append the option that says select model. So model drop down, append child, there we go. So select make, now we've got it, select model. I'm surprised I missed that, but there it is. Okay, now what we'll do with this select model is pretty simple. We'll just say that if the model ID is not empty, then we're going to build a form submit button. So I'll say const submit btn is document create element button. I'll say that submit button set attribute type is going to be submit. Then I'll say submit button inner HTML equals submit. I'm smiling, I think I've got it. Then we're going to say quote form append child of submit button. Let's just save, refresh. So here we go, Audi A1, and there it is. Pretty cool. Of course, we can give our submit button an ID. So submit button, keep on doing that. So submit button set attribute ID, I'll call it submit underscore btn. So when we do these remove things, remove element, we'll chuck in our submit button as well. And that is the end of this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope it wasn't too fast and annoying, but there we go. So we'll do BMWs. I'll choose a 3 series, and there's our submit button. Now if we go back, I'll choose Audi. You'll see that this has cleared. Let's do A4. There we go. Now if we do select make, it says you did not select one. It gives us the empty thing. And there it is. Thank you so much. End of tutorial. Alright. How did I do, folks? How did I do? It was kind of a bit of a miserable show-off fest. But to do that in 49 minutes or whatever is not too bad. Okay, I'm going to switch this one off. I'll be back in just a minute though. Folks in the live stream, hang on. I'll be back in just 2 minutes, okay? Here we go. See you in just a minute. Hold on, how do I end this?